To save his sanity, Castaneda returned to California and set about writing up his thesis. At the time, he had no idea of its potential.
One time, he pulled out this dirty, rat-chewed manuscript and said, "Here, would you read this piece of shit?"
But then, Castaneda's thesis was picked up by the University of California Press and published in 1968.
I just was amazed. I never thought that Carlos would get that book published. And from then on, there was no limit to what, what happened.
The timing of the book couldn't have been better. A generation in the midst of conflict tuned into Castaneda's idea that an alternative, better reality could be accessed by following Don Juan's teachings.
I think the reason why the book became so famous was because, spurred by the Vietnam War, a lot of people really embraced anti-establishment position and went after drugs to give them pleasure. And I think Carlos's book gave some scientific validation to their pleasure seeking.
Key to his contributions was the notion that our ordinary reality was not the real reality, but rather something that we had learned to perceive as members of our culture. And while this notion is customary in anthropology, he took it to an extreme, suggesting that there are totally different realities that can be experienced if one applies awareness and intention.
The teachings of Don Juan sold 16,000 copies a week, and Castaneda received the ultimate accolade, a place on the front cover of Time magazine.
Carlos was so popular. Once his books came out, he became the most popular guru in the country. Everybody wanted his writings. He became rich and famous. That made him a millionaire. His first book.
When his publishers pressed him for more books, Castaneda decided to return to Mexico to continue his research with Don Juan. 2 new books soon followed. Within anthropology, Castaneda's extreme method inspired a new generation of students, like J. Fikes.
He was a participant, so I thought, wow, that's the way that we should do things, is we should try to participate in the rituals if we want to learn something.
Fikes decided to follow in Castaneda's footsteps.
The next summer, I decided I would go to Mexico and try to find someone who could give me the sacred mushrooms that Castaneda wrote about. So I went down to Oaxaca and found an Indian village and found an old lady that sold me the mushrooms. And I had this feeling I was flying, just going right up into heaven. It was a great feeling. So I had these very extraordinary experiences that made me think that Castaneda must be right.
Fikes decided to study a similar Mexican tribe called the Huichol. They were well known for using the cactus peyote, and like Castaneda, a shaman decided to take him under his wing.
I impressed a Huichol shaman enough because he said, well, what did you see? What did you experience? And I told him. And he said, yeah, that's what this means. And so then he decided that he would help me. I proved myself, and then I was accepted. So again, that just affirmed that Castaneda must have been on the right track.
Then, at the height of his popularity, Castaneda made an announcement. His great spiritual mentor had died. But this was no ordinary death. Don Juan had turned into a shining column of light and journeyed to another reality called infinity. Castaneda now abandoned academic anthropology. He declared he had succeeded Don Juan as a shaman, charged with the task of passing on his knowledge to the world.
Carlos Castaneda becomes a being like Don Juan. He is a shaman, and the term that is specifically used in the books is the term nagual, which means a being with enormous energy, a leader who can lead a group to freedom.
Basing himself in LA, Castaneda, in his new role as spiritual guru, attracted a massive following. He offered the American audience a legal, drug-free route to the Enlightenment he had been taught by Don Juan.
In ancient Mexico, a lineage of men and women seers embarked on a navigational journey with the intent to expand the boundaries of human perception. These dreamt movements were taught to Carlos Castaneda by Don Juan Matus, a Yaqui Indian from Sonora, Mexico.
Central to his teachings was tensegrity, part martial art, part exercise class, part religious practice.
He was teaching maybe 700, 800 people at a time, all in the room, all doing the same thing at the same time. It's basically like a very large exercise class.
The first time I saw Castaneda, this little Mexican-looking man comes in front of the class, and somebody took me by the arm and said, "Can I introduce you to Carlos Castaneda?" And I almost shit in my pants because this was Castaneda who was up front, who had been up front doing those movements all the time, and I thought it was just this little Mexican guy, this little brown guy.
Carlos Castaneda systematized and developed the magical passes into their modern form, tensegrity.
I thought he was just alive. He was spontaneous and charming.
And he was very funny.
He was a comic, he was an actor, he had terrific coordination and charismatic beyond expression.
I loved his idea of that there's more out there in the world than we can actually see. And Carlos promised that he would teach us and show us